Hello, welcome everyone. I am Shannon Sclafani. I head up the Urban Land Institute of Michigan, and I am so excited to be with you all this morning to introduce the 2020-2021 Larson Center for Leadership's presentation of recommendations for the future of work. In this time of intense change, the Larson Center has largely participated virtually, creating a unique challenge to build new relationships in this unprecedented era. I'm so proud that this group has continuously taken the time to invest in themselves, to learn, grow, and connect. It has been truly inspiring. As a matter of housekeeping, we're going to ask that everybody mute your audio and your video for the duration of the presentation in order to spotlight the presenters. There will be plenty of time for questions following the presentation, but we also encourage you to type them in the chat throughout as your thoughts are fresh. Each year, the Larson Center's leaders spend time providing technical assistance to a community in need. As this year has been truly unique, so is the focus of this year's project. Rather than a single community as the recipient, the group focused this year's recommendations to the real estate community as a whole. In September of 2020, the Urban Land Institute partnered with Ernst & Young to launch a global survey focused on the future of work. Surveying 555 real estate professionals around the globe, the survey resulted in predictions for office space, work from home, the types of spaces, and ways that people will engage in work in the post-pandemic era. While the predictions and key findings of this survey are incredibly interesting, we wanted to take the work a step further, and the Larson leaders have focused on recommendations for implementation and adaptation to the predictions of the survey respondents. The survey showed that the future of work will continue to be more remote, digital, flexible, that there will be changes in the model in the short term. Real estate is expected to have a reduction in office space in the longer term. They expect that office space will need to provide more amenities in order to attract people and create more human resource value for their companies. Remote work will continue to be a thing of the future, and work will be fully embedded in the real estate of our cities. So in response to this, we created 5 groups within the Larson cohort to provide practical direction in response to the key findings of the survey. Group 1 is focusing on adapting and repurposing obsolete office spaces. If in fact the need for less office space becomes a reality, what are new uses for consideration of these spaces? How do these uses translate into buildings that may still need to serve mixed uses? What are the investment propositions of these adaptations? Group 2 focused on the health and well-being of buildings. So what technologies and amenities need to be implemented into spaces in order to promote the health and wellness of its tenants? What are the cost implications of such amenities? What types of amenities can be automated and which are people-driven? Group 3 focused on the flexibility and third spaces. So what are the ways that real estate can play a role in filling the need for small business recovery and resilience? Are there unique uses for small businesses to provide flexible and future or collaborative spaces? What does flexibility in terms of leasing in space look like? Group 4 focused on corporate culture and identity. So as organizations continue to expand this work from home capacity and project that this will continue in a post-COVID era, how can companies continue to build buy-in to their corporate culture and identity? What considerations to the physical space will ensure that meetings take place and are meaningful? What can be done to ensure an inclusive work environment, whether in person or remotely? And finally, Group 5 focused on talent recruitment and retention. What do organizations need to be considering for talent recruitment and retention when there is less significance placed on the physical location of workspaces? Do these only apply to work from home, or are these tactics that frontline organizations should also be considering? How can cities and suburbs make investments to support these efforts? The groups really are focusing for the real estate community on what does the future of work look like. With that, let's move forward to group 2.
All right, thanks, Shannon. I'll start off by saying my name's Ted Hirsch, and yeah, we focused on the health and well-being of buildings. Our group consisted of myself, Dan Comer, Maria Galarza, Rama Gupta, and Clark Lewis. And we just wanted to start off with a nice impactful quote that we had from one of the industry leaders that we spoke with during our research, Mr. Greg McDuffie of the Detroit Wayne Joint Building Authority. And he said that nobody should give up the opportunity to reinvent a space. And we just thought that was a great quote that was really impactful. Next slide, please. So our goal was to examine the latest technologies and amenities that can be implemented to promote health and well-being of buildings. And kind of one of the main conclusions that we came to is that what that really means is it's about the people. While things like energy efficiency and sustainability are certainly important, we think the focus really should be on human health. Because the talent is the most important component of a successful business. And we want to emphasize that their physical and mental health directly impact their productivity. So providing people with a healthy, comfortable, and mentally engaging environment is going to benefit an owner or an employer on multiple levels, and it's obviously going to benefit employees and consumers. So something we use to guide us in defining our recommendations is the WELL building standard. This is kind of similar to the LEED system, which rates green building design and construction strategies, except the WELL building standard measures features of the built environment that directly impact human health and well-being. Slide, please. So we've identified 5 categories of technology and amenity-driven solutions that can be implemented to improve the health and well-being of buildings, and kind of in response to the global pandemic, and also with an eye toward the future. And for the purposes of our portion of the presentation, we mainly considered Class A buildings in central business districts. So our 5 categories we have are workplace design, building management systems, emerging technologies, experience, and outdoor and public spaces. And just before we move on, I just wanted to take the opportunity. We wanted to give a shout out to the people that we talked to directly. As I mentioned, Mr. Greg McDuffie of the Detroit Wayne Joint Building Authority, Maria Cook of HKS, and Walter Amakuchi of Code Labs. Thank you guys very much for the great feedback on some tough questions that we had for you. Slide, please. So in regard to actual workplace layout and design, a lot of major changes that are going to need to take place. And one of the other great quotes that we had from Maria Cook was that office spaces are going to need to be more experiential rather than prescriptive. For instance, typical programming might be based on total number of employees, or who need a dedicated seat or a space, and prescribing a minimum area per employee to determine the required floor area. And this kind of translated into fitting as many people in as little space as possible. Now, with the rapid emergence of work from home and third spaces, the consideration is going to shift to how many people actually come into the office on any given day of the week. And this is really going to be driven by choice. So employees are going to want more flexibility. And if they're going to be making that choice to come into the office, then the experience that they're going to get in the office is going to need to be a little more fulfilling than kind of what's typically offered right now. Next slide, please. So here we have some of these recommended improvements that can be implemented as immediate, intermediate, or long-term solutions. And kind of the general consensus throughout is that the the relative costs of implementation are going to increase as we move from immediate to longer term solutions. So in regard to workplace design, an immediate solution could be as simple as lobby reconfiguration, which would help maintain social distancing and can modify the flow of people in and out of the building. This would be relatively low cost and focuses more on immediate concerns about COVID-19. A more intermediate term solution could be to improve user experience and their mental health by redesigning areas and increasing natural light. This would be a little bit more of a significant investment and could be something like adding or replacing windows. And then a longer term solution would really be using intentional design to increase access to outdoor amenities. This is actually another one of our main categories and it's focused on enhancing the user experience and their mental and physical health. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. Slide, please. So the next concept that we had is in regard to building management systems. And that's the equipment, the control systems like ventilation, power, lighting, security. And an obvious objective for an owner and an operator would be to make these systems run efficiently in order to save money on energy costs. And historically, this has kind of been accomplished by a method of conservation, which can sacrifice sometimes the quality of the indoor environment. But with new technologies emerging, high operating efficiency can actually be accomplished without making that sacrifice. And we spend so much of our lives indoors, naturally, the quality of the indoor environment is going to have a huge impact on our physical and mental health. And as I mentioned before, when people are happy and healthy, they're going to be more productive. So on the next slides, we're going to take a look at some of the recommendations that we have to optimize building system performance and the quality of the indoor environment. So first we have some immediate solutions like upgrading air filters or installing air purification measures. And these are relatively low cost solutions that can be pretty easily implemented right away and have an immediate impact. This would help to improve employee health by removing viruses and other pollutants from the air. Next, we have an intermediate solution, which would be to incorporate building automation systems, or as it's called, BAS monitoring software. And that allows these systems like ventilation, lighting, power, and the like to be monitored and analyzed kind of as a group. And something that we learned was that a lot of existing equipment or devices in buildings don't necessarily need to be upgraded in order to incorporate a BAS software. So while this is a little bit more costly than just simply upgrading air filters, it's still less costly than actually purchasing new mechanical equipment. Which leads me to the longer term solution we would recommend, which is incorporating this BAS software in addition to incorporating new technology hardware, something like occupancy detection systems. And something like that can help make the BAS software even more effective and can be combined in conjunction with some of these other technology upgrades that we'll look at in the next slide. Slide, please. So while the immediate and intermediate term solutions that I mentioned on the previous slide focus a little bit more on the physical health of building users, this longer term solution of also incorporating technology hardware not only aims to improve the physical health, but also has a kind of a more identifiable impact on mental health as well. There's an array of touchless technologies that are emerging, like voice activated appliances and lighting, contactless keypads for building security, and even robotic cleaning. It's all becoming more widely available and desired. And it's pretty obvious that this can be seen as a direct response to a situation like COVID-19, but would help to make building users feel more comfortable using office space on a regular basis as they transition back to the office, not only now, but into the future. Slide, please. So the next category we had is tenant engagement and experience. This was touched on a little bit earlier, but we know building users are placing a lot more value on actually having a great workplace experience. And it's important for employees to feel engaged and connected, know exactly what's going on, and have information available to them on demand. And so we're recommending that owners and operators encourage this collaborative environment, increase transparency any way that they can, and create a curated experience that's tailored to their employees and consumers. Slide, please. So this idea of creating a curated experience coincides with the rise in popularity of prop tech, or new and innovative technological products that are tailored to the real estate markets. And employers could capitalize on this by implementing apps or software that engage employees and improve their experience. And at the same time, this would allow for more informed decisions on the owner's part, which would also lead to increased tenant satisfaction and retention. Slide, please. So this idea of launching a digital platform that's tailored to your building or your brand is kind of a longer term solution. And it could be an app that provides ways for tenants to engage with and access different spaces or amenities in a building. But it also gives owners an opportunity to track and analyze how their buildings are being used so they can make more informed decisions. So some other solutions that are a little bit shorter term and would also be able to increase engagement and transparency could be things like conducting tenant surveys, issuing newsletters, or creating targeted ads that reach people through social media. So these are solutions that could be implemented a little quicker than actually launching an interactive digital platform. Next slide, please. So the final solution we had, which we touched on earlier, is the incorporation of outdoor spaces. And also, like I've mentioned before, we really think it's important to note that productivity is directly impacted by health and well-being. And one of the most important resources that can be utilized to improve mental well-being is the outdoors. We're highlighting this with kind of an excerpt from this LL Bean survey that was done in 2018 that found some of the top perceived benefits to working outdoors. These are things like improved mood, lower stress levels, provides relaxation, increases happiness, which are obviously all fantastic qualities to a solution. So we'll take a look at the next slide, what some of those examples could look like. So an immediate solution could be as simple as incorporating movable street furniture outside a building to provide a place for employees to work. So this not only encourages workers to enjoy the outdoors, but it also helps to maintain some level of social distancing as people are getting more comfortable transitioning back into the office. A more intermediate solution could be constructing some kind of semi-permanent indoor outdoor structure that allows people to feel like they're outdoors while still providing some level of environmental control. Think about the dining igloos that we all see that have been becoming so popular, but except reimagine that and tailor it to accommodating working employees. So then the longer term solution to this would be just to really invest more in incorporating access to the outdoors with intentional building design right from the start. So this is kind of a vague solution, but there really are just an unlimited number of creative ways that one could incorporate greater access to the outdoors for a building. And just kind of as one example, I remember reading about one architecture firm that incorporated permanent structures in an outdoor centralized gathering area, provided protection from the elements, but also gave a sense of being outdoors. They also had a large projector screen out there that could be used not only for graphics during meetings, but could be used for entertainment during break times, or an array of different things. So there's really just an unlimited number of possibilities for incorporating outdoors into intentional building design. And we think that's really important moving into the future. So I'll end there and hand it off to Andrew, who's going to talk a little bit about third spaces.
Great. Thanks, Ted. My name is Andrew Sellinger, and I worked with Isaac Douglas, Art Eckert, Schwen von Osterhout, and Brandon Stone as we looked at third spaces and flexibility. Next slide, please. So the definition of third space or third place, for those who don't know, it's any public space that is outside either the home or workplace. It's a place where people can gather and meet, form bonds. It's essential for the well-being of the individual as well as the vitality of the community. And many of these spaces are small businesses. The challenges we see it, obviously, most recently, COVID has eroded the revenue generating potential of bricks and mortar, as well as the long-term trend of digital commerce. These two factors together have diminished the profitability of these operating businesses and at the same time, the profitability of the real estate owner. So unless the owners of the businesses and the real estate can adapt, not only would there be a significant fallout from an economic perspective, but we also foresee a loss of quality of life as these places disappear. Next slide, please. So as we think about this, think about how Amazon is killing bookstores, or how Peloton might incentivize people to work out from home versus at a gym. Ray Oldenburg is one of the foremost thinkers on third space. He sees them as places where social bonds develop and places where relationships occur. And though this book was published in 1989, even then he identified that these places were slipping away from our isolated modern world, and that this will affect us all in slight, painful ways. So this was obviously long before the rise of Amazon and other technological disruptors. Next slide, please. So for the purpose of this presentation, we decided to look at 3 types of third space. These in particular, we identified as being relatively susceptible to disruption, and also fragile from the point of being primarily small businesses. So the categories we looked at were restaurants and bars. This includes everything from coffee shops to ice cream shops, anywhere you can buy food or drink. Boutiques and bookstores are small retailers. This includes comic book stores, clothing boutiques, home goods, gift shops, record stores, etc. And also gyms and studios, which would include things like spin studios, boxing, CrossFit, and yoga studios. Next slide, please. While we believe the pandemic threat will eventually recede, there may be some lingering behavioral changes, maybe some long-term behavioral changes. We didn't make too many assumptions in that regard. One assumption that is relatively non-controversial is that the digital economy will continue to grow and continue to erode the profitability of bricks and mortar. For this presentation, we issued a series of recommendations and divided them between business owner and real estate owner. While I assume my audience today is mostly real estate owners, we included recommendations for business owners because we see this line as being increasingly blurred. And if the premise is true that the profitability of these bricks and mortar operators is under attack, the stakes are even higher for real estate owners as well. So in the future, we see a greater need for active management of the operating business as well as collaboration. For example, if you're a real estate owner and a tenant comes to you willing to pay your asking rent, if they're a retailer and they don't have a digital strategy, that might be something to reconsider, just beyond just the economics. The themes of our recommendations we found fell into two broad categories. For the real estate owner, anticipating and accommodating new uses and optimizing for flexibility. And for the business owner, a strategic consideration of how digital can enhance their bricks and mortar. It's not one or the other strategy. It's really how does one build on the other. Finally, we categorized our recommendations in terms of economic feasibility, green being the quickest, easiest, and cheapest to implement. Next slide, please. So for restaurants and bars, in the near term for existing real estate, we recommend owners investigate how to invest in accommodating new uses for their spaces. Specifically, as we've seen a new trend of greater emphasis on indoor-outdoor spaces. So this would include investments in things like roll-up doors and garage doors, heated floors and heat lamps. And also, we're seeing more deliveries. And so covered pickup, whether it's from a delivery service or the consumer, we think will be more important. For new products, we are seeing trends such as ghost kitchens, which are built for not off-site consumption and part-time occupancy of restaurant users. Also, we're seeing a proliferation of single envelope marketplace style developments. Our example here is the Detroit Shipping Company, where they've built a marketplace style development and have several food-based tenants. The key trade-off for this type of development, operators get smaller spaces and a less customized build out, but they also save in cost and gain from the clustering effect of having all of these food uses in one space. For the business owner, we recommend investing in online cooking classes. This we see as the growing trend of a chef as a personality or as a celebrity. We see local restaurants, even now that people are using technologies like Zoom, restaurants using that to kind of promote their business and broadcast into local homes. We think that there's an opportunity for a co-working model, even for restaurants to capture remote workers. We think that there's a portion of the population that will want to work remotely, but not necessarily from their home. And so we think restaurants, if they're either closed or have off-peak utilization, would be able to offer their space as a potential co-working alternative. Finally, delivery, online marketplace, and finish at home meals, we think are an important part of any restaurant's operations. Next slide, please. For boutiques and bookstores, for the real estate owner, again, the single envelope marketplace style developments we think are going to be a growing model. In the meantime, mixed use, for example, we have here Shinola Detroit has a coffee shop in their space. We're also expecting to see less tenant improvement allowances in exchange for shorter leases. For the business owner, our recommendation is for every operator to have a full digital presence, on-site programming, cross-marketing with other businesses, for example, in this case, a coffee shop within your retail footprint, and invest in third space enhancements such as stages, seating, and bar and coffee type investments. Next slide, please. One model that is interesting to us and we think works very well is the Rust Belt Market in Ferndale. It's a large space that contains over 40 small businesses. They also have a full bar, event space, and they're home to Ferndale radio. So we recommend investments in more of this type of retail product going forward. Next slide, please. Finally, for gyms and studios, we recommend larger spaces that incorporate mixed uses. For example, food and beverage, for example, a smoothie bar, retail, and we're even seeing some gyms building office space for co-working concepts. The example here, we looked at the Detroit Athletic Club. While it's not necessarily a traditional example of a gym use, it's been around for 130 years. So it's had that longevity versus, who knows how many gym trends have come and gone in that time. The example here is a recent addition to the building, which is a rooftop restaurant and cigar bar. So the concept of investing in these third spaces, we believe adds to the DAC's resiliency. For the business owner, we recommend online classes and obviously the space designed to accommodate these online classes, also equipment sales and retail sales on site. So in conclusion, our recommendations fall into two themes of, for the real estate owner, anticipating new uses, promoting flexibility, and for the business owner, a consideration of how digital plays into their bricks and mortar footprint. And with that, I will pass it on to Bali with group 4.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Bali Kumar, and along with Blair Gould, Andy McIntosh, Chris Riggert, and John McGraw, we did a lot of research into corporate culture and identity and how that impacts a post-COVID world in the workplace. Next slide, please. So the main question we dug into after reading lots and lots of Harvard Business Review and similar articles was noting that pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, the work from home capacity or work from anywhere capacity is being expanded. How do we allow companies to continue to build buy-in into their corporate culture and into their corporate identity? And the three things that jumped out at us that we're going to focus on in this presentation are communication, workspace, and values and priorities. Next slide, please. Obviously, if you're going to increase your corporate culture or build buy-in into a corporate culture, you need to have a corporate culture. And so this is a pinwheel from Deloitte that shows that corporate culture really has a lot of inputs, and it requires a lot of work from people to contemplate what their values and priorities are and to understand it and communicate it. So first, obviously, you have to create a corporate culture and then communicate it to the folks on the team. And leading from the top, very important, because it's one thing to say you have, for instance, an inclusive culture, but if it's not shown from the top, then maybe it's just in name only. And one thing that folks have really thought about these days is adapting when need be. I mean, COVID times has really pushed people to adapt, and culture is not a static thing. Culture moves with time. Next slide, please. Speaking of culture moving with time, Google and Twitter, known for having very, very good corporate cultures, known for leading the tech industry and leading in some ways a lot of corporations in how to take care of staff. Google has campuses worldwide. Folks come in, they get free food, whatever meals. They can do laundry and dry cleaning on campus. They really take care of folks, but during the pandemic, everybody's not going to campus anymore. So what to do? Shift the corporate culture, keep the values, but be nimble. So these are companies that have pushed people to work from home indefinitely. And they're not just letting them sink or swim. You go home, but they're still working on the whole person. We say, okay, when you were here, we took care of you. Now that you're at home, we'll help you out with daycare. We'll help you out with flexibility with respect to time and with respect to location. This is demonstrative of a strong corporate culture. Next slide, please. NVIDIA and Target, also great other examples of different ways to maintain your corporate culture and take care of staff. NVIDIA knew that raises were very important to staff, And so what they did is they kicked up their performance reviews 6 months, so that way folks could get their raises 6 months early. And they're really, really thoughtful about mental health and working with staff with children by pulling together online resources, virtual field trips, and just taking care of the whole person. Target, different type of company, thought more about sick leave and thought more about pay increases for in-store workers. But really the point is, when a company takes care of its people, the people take care of the company because they're bought in, they're more loyal. Next slide, please. Now, tactics to effectuate a corporate culture and an effective corporate culture. The three that we dug into again: communication and transparency, workplace, and values and priorities. Next slide, please. Communication and transparency, obviously very different when folks are not in the office from 9 to 5 together. There's synchronous communication and there's asynchronous communication. Synchronous being at the same time, asynchronous not at the same time. Synchronous communication in the office, folks get together in a conference room, figure out a problem, find a solution. Synchronous nowadays, maybe people get on Zoom, maybe people have cameras on, maybe people have cameras off, maybe people do phone calls. Really, it's about finding the right cadence for the company and figuring out what works for staff. Asynchronous communication. Maybe people back in the day used to leave Post-it notes on people's desks if they weren't there. Hey, I need this, or when you can get to this, please drop by my office. But nowadays, there are so many different technologies, and some are integrated super well with other technologies, but it's important to figure out what the right cadence is. In my company, for instance, we have Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Outlook, very well integrated. And if we need something immediately done, it's done through Teams. And if we need something done, at some point, we do it through email. And so that's the cadence that works for us. Knowledge sharing strategy is also important because there's not necessarily a file room you can go to, dig out a file and figure out the information. Or someone's brain, you can just pop into their office and pick their brain for an answer. Now people are getting used to either doing things through some sort of cloud or whatever the knowledge sharing strategy that's most effective for the team is. Folks need to codify it and move forward with that. And community collisions. We work in real estate, and real estate is really a people-driven, relationships-driven business. And so the simple chit chat by the water cooler or having lunch together quickly between meetings is something that's very important because it solidifies relationships. So be thoughtful about how to continue building relationships, whether that be through virtual happy hours or virtual game nights, or finding ways to go for walks with folks, something to keep the people-centeredness at the forefront is important. Next slide, please. The physical workspace is changing. And this has been discussed in previous slides, so I won't harp on it too much. But the two things that we brought out with respect to corporate culture are embracing the hybrid work environment and where and size of office. The hybrid work environment is not a sink or swim environment. If you work at a company where people are used to being in the office with a comfortable chair and 3 screens, and that's how they're most productive, and you're going to say, okay, well, you come in once or twice a week, what do you do with folks to make sure that they are as productive as they can be? Is that something that's a part of corporate culture? And presumably it is. So consider how to make sure that folks have the right Wi-Fi at home, the right work setup, so that way they can be productive. And just supporting folks in that way. Also, a lot of companies are downsizing their large offices into multiple small offices and co-locating or being closer to certain key clients. So that's another key consideration. Next slide, please. Values and priorities. Corporate culture is based on the bedrock of values and priorities. And so how do we do this in a COVID and post-COVID world? One, focus on employee experience is sort of fading. And it's being replaced with is a focus on life experience. People are whole people. And when people are working remotely, that really, really shows itself, whether it means people's cat walk across the Zoom screen, or, you know, people that are being taken care of by the employee in the background. They're whole people, and how do we manage that? There's one study that showed that employers that support their employees with their life experience see increases in mental health and physical health, and obviously buy-in into the company. Another thing that we looked at was whether companies are adopting a corporate stance on social and political issues. And the study that we looked at showed that nearly 3/4 of employees expect their employers to become more involved in the cultural debates of the day. So either a company is going to take a stance, or they're not going to take a stance, and not taking a stance is taking a stance in the eyes of these employees. Teams and microculture both blend into this slide and the next slide. So I'll just ask for the next slide, please, and dig in there. Company size matters because in some cases, the team is the entire company. And in some cases, the company is so big that each individual team has its individual corporate culture. And you want to focus at that level, at the micro level, at the team level. The hybrid working model that works best for the organization is the most important thing to drill down into and figure out. And, you know, the diversity of the workforce also shows how people are whole people, whether that means parents versus non-parents, whether that means, you know, racial or gender or class-based diversity. You got to focus on individuals as well as teams, as well as the entire company. And I will move to the next slide, please. But, you know, this is a lot of information, but just know that the power is yours. If there's an element of corporate culture that doesn't quite work, or used to work and doesn't work now, or you know, might work now but might not work later, culture is nimble. Culture is not static. You can change culture every time there's a new impact. So always identify what works, what doesn't work. Change what doesn't work, because we have all become very, very adaptable, and we should build on that progress. And now I'm going to pass the slides to Maria.
Thank you so much, Bali and Team 4. Great job. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Massey with Group 5, here to uncover our findings on talent recruitment and retention. So the rock stars on our team are Jesus Madrigal, Andrew Smith, Grant Marshall, Paul Cadrano, and here's truly, Maria Massey. So let's get into it. Next slide, please. So our assignment was to research what organizations need to consider in terms of both talent recruitment and retention when there's currently less significance around physical location in workspaces. We looked into how companies that are currently in the work from home environment are thinking about recruitment and retention, as well as how frontline organizations that might be working on site are doing the same. Also, are there things that cities and suburbs can do to support retention and recruitment in their local communities? Next slide, please. In our research, we conducted interviews asking questions about challenges with recruiting, creative incentives organizations are providing, what benefits have been found to having employees work from home, and what has employee retention looked like. We had conversations with various parties, including HR reps from both frontline and non-frontline organizations, city government personnel, as well as employees in both the work from home and the frontline sort of arena. And we also conducted online research to help us uncover what talent recruitment and retention would look like. Next slide, please. So focusing on frontline organizations for a moment, organizations that work mostly on site and not so much working from home, like healthcare professionals, first responders, grocers, etc. Some of these frontline workers said they did have the opportunity to work from home some of the time, and it actually worked better than they expected. However, there's still a preference to work on site. In terms of recruitment, there has not been much change since the demand is still very much there for these frontline organizations today. We included this graph that actually came from LinkedIn showing the US healthcare roles with increasing number of open jobs. So for example, intensive care nurses, there's almost a 200% increase in demand for these positions and so on from the list below. In terms of retention, however, we found that competitive compensation and benefits are at the top of the list of importance, followed by a strong communication and a healthy work culture, which you just heard about from the previous group. Although working on-site is preferred, some said having the flexibility to work from home some of the time is also helpful when working to retain employees in frontline organizations. Next slide, please. While interviewing frontline employees, they had mentioned seeking additional benefits and perks. A few ideas that surfaced from our conversations, specifically with healthcare workers, were actually related to what you heard earlier about reinventing spaces. These healthcare workers suggested repurposing underutilized or underperforming space, perhaps in a large complex like a hospital, into fitness centers exclusively for employees. This exclusivity factor around employees only acts as both a perk for retention and perhaps a recruitment tool depending on the amenities provided in this sort of space. Other non-traditional benefits that were noted in our research were paid volunteer time and other wellness programs such as counseling, daycare, etc. A few of our interviewees mentioned having to pay for parking or just the general inconvenience of commuting to work while a lot of their peers might be, working from home. So offering gas cards or other mobility options such as bus or train passes would help retain their talent. Next slide, please. Switching over to non-frontline organizations, those that are mostly working from home these days, we found that the experience of those employees involved a noticeable increase in productivity and happiness. It was also noted that there is a tendency to lose the personal professional balance, which might be attributed to working in sweatpants or sharing your workspace with your little ones or your family pets. There's also been a decrease in collaboration since most meetings are held in this sort of virtual video conference space instead of, maybe a conference room with a whiteboard or something like that. When it comes to recruiting new non-frontline employees, the experience working from home has shown to be missing the personal touch when interviewing. I know I personally miss the handshakes and disbursement of business cards at the end of these sort of occasions. Others mentioned it has been challenging to pair new recruits with a mentor for onboarding and professional growth in a work from home environment. And having the option to either work from home or work from the office or a hybrid of the two has shown to be a real incentive for recruiting, as well as providing additional benefits such as technology reimbursement, moving assistance, and car insurance discounts for local and out-of-town employees. Next slide, please. In order to retain both new and existing talent while working from home, companies have mentioned becoming more fluid in the roles assigned to employees in order to fill gaps. Much of our findings really point to maintaining a work-life balance in terms of more flexibility around work schedules to help care for family, for example. Another example is offering more personal days, as well as additional emotional and financial support for those struggling in the current climate. Next slide, please. One of the questions we were tasked with responding to is how local communities can provide investment to support both retention and recruitment in their communities. It's important to remember that while there is less significance around place in a work from home or work from anywhere environment, placemaking still matters. Keeping these communities unique and providing new experiences will help to retain and attract new talent, according to our research. Areas with high standards of livability will see the most attraction and retention. So here's a placemaking example that might look familiar, Campus Martius, Detroit. I wanted to provide a fun pre-COVID example. I thought that might be refreshing. So you could see the beach scene on the right side of the screen, as well as the winter scene with mask wearing being enforced. Campus Martius is a great example of placemaking because it identifies an opportunity to create a place where people can enjoy a unique experience in their community. Perhaps a socially distant, mask-wearing, enforced outdoor space in an area where one does not currently exist could be a great investment by a local community to help people get out of their homes or home offices and stick around to contribute to their local economies. Next slide, please. Furthermore, communities need to invest in and adapt to modernizations in mobility, anything from bike lanes to regional transit, just to give employees more options. Climate change resiliency is another investment communities can make in terms of attraction and retention. With some of the natural disasters over the past few years, it gives areas in more moderate climates an opportunity to attract those from some of the less resilient communities. So this map here shows the United States broken down by counties, displaying the least to most resilient communities. Next slide, please. In terms of policy, if communities are looking to retain and attract employees in a work from home or work from anywhere environment, our research found that offering employee partnerships or an incentive to live in a particular community might be the way to do it. Employer partnerships, according to our research, involve businesses connecting with other organizations that have laid off or furloughed employees. Instead of seeking outside talent, this is an option to retain talent in a community by finding permanent or temporary employment to these employees that are out of work. Another policy example is a Live Here incentive, similar to the Live Detroit program that was launched by the Downtown Detroit Partnership in 2011. If you're not familiar with the Live Detroit program, a Live Here incentive is where local organizations partner to raise subsidies for employees that would be able to buy or rent living spaces in a particular community. While mortgage rates are low and rental rates in urban areas are lowering, this could be a real benefit to boosting the residential real estate market in downtown areas that seem to be losing employees to the suburbs by attracting new talent or even retaining the current talent pool that they have. This concludes our findings for Group 5. Thank you so much for listening. I will kick it back to David and Team 1 now.
Thank you, Maria. And sorry about that. I was having some Wi-Fi challenges earlier. But thank you for your patience. And our group is going to talk about the future of office space and sort of how we've gotten to this point. Working alongside me were Jacob Bulkowski, Sarah Carlson, Sean White, and John Lopatin. So if you don't mind getting started, could you click the slide, please? All right, so what we're going to do is sort of walk you through how we got here, the outlook moving forward, considerations for stakeholders, and the approach that different people are taking to combat these changes, if you will. So the first trend, what we're looking at here, is that over the last 10 years specifically, but more broadly over the last 30, companies have been starting to reduce their office footprint. And they've been doing this mainly for two reasons. One, just to reduce real estate costs, but also there's been a gradual shift to an open office collaborative floor space, which just inherently requires less square footage per worker. Slide, please. The second trend is a gradual shift towards greater population density. What we've seen is that more and more people are relocating to closer to city centers. And this might not mean necessarily that they are living in the absolute downtown of large cities, but ultimately they are moving closer to the city center. And in the Detroit area, this might be an inner ring suburb like Ferndale or Berkeley or Oak Park. And this is a pretty consistent theme that we've seen across the country. And what this means is as people move, obviously the buildings don't follow them. So you're seeing a sort of dislocation between where the office space is and where people are living. Slide, please. So between these two, like I said, there's been a dislocation. Ultimately, it's a reallocation of demand in addition to a reduction in total demand. And as a result of this, there's, not every market is the same. But what we've seen is that pretty consistently, the Class A best building in the market, these buildings are still doing well. This has been dubbed an ongoing flight to quality within this sector. Demand for Class A properties has in a lot of cases surged. And meanwhile, demand for Class B and Class C properties has not done nearly as well. And people that are looking for Class A properties are looking for a lot of the amenities and technology that that has come about as of late. And this has been, again, what has led to this, this divergence, if you will. Slide, please. So why is this split occurring? Historically, everyone needed office space, but nowadays people have a choice, as we've heard, with all the virtual working, with all the different ways to work, people have a choice as to far as where they want to work. So those that are choosing to continue to lease office space, they're doing it for the potential to enhance the worker experience. They are making this conscious choice to lease an office. They're spending the money, but they don't have to otherwise. So in doing so, they view the office as a place to build company culture, to attract and retain employees, to foster creativity and organic creative abrasion. They're doing this because they feel it's going to lead to not only improvements within their bottom line, but with the employee experience. Slide, please. So for those that do choose to maintain an office, what they're specifically looking for are amenities, common spaces, gym, restaurant, rooftop deck, meeting spaces, technology that allows for virtual conference rooms and things of that nature. Again, all of these different facilities are just ways to enhance the experience beyond simply sitting at your desk and completing tasks. Slide, please. So with these things in mind, owners and investors have started to adjust their plans to accommodate these recent trends. Class A owners, like I said, are doing well. Meanwhile, Class B owners have arrived at this sort of decision-making time. They can either try to invest the money necessary to upgrade their property to call it a Class B plus or a Class A minus, where they might not be competitive with the very best building, but it could be a discount alternative that still attracts more cost-conscious office users. For the other buildings, the Class B owners that don't think that they can cost effectively make these upgrades, or the Class C owners who just, frankly, their building doesn't have the inherent qualities necessary to make this transition. Slide, please. They've arrived at a different decision. They've realized that in order to remain competitive, in order to attract investment, we're going to have to change the use for the building entirely. For owner users, which, for those that don't know, these are companies that they're normal companies and they happen to own their building, like say an industrial company or manufacturer. These companies are having to make very different decisions. Do we downsize? Do we sell and just the building entirely and just rent somewhere else? But for now, we're going to focus more on commercial owners or investor-owned properties, just given that this is a broader swath of the market. So for these companies, or for these owners, I should say, they're having to make this decision of, they've recognized that their building isn't viable any longer as an office property. We're going to have to switch over. We're going to have to do something new. And it's important to note that form, character, and location are really what dictates the future use of the property. For example, a tall, skinny building that's historic and located in a downtown, that's a perfect conversion property to become a multifamily building or become a hotel building. Multifamily and hotel users are willing to typically pay a premium for that type of space. However, a building that is short and wide in a suburban location makes a lot more sense as a light industrial, data center, call center, R&D, medical office, something like that. That the bones of the building just fit that use, fit the owner, what they're looking for a lot better. Now, in other cases, these are sort of conventional use options. In other cases though, slide please, owners are getting a bit more creative. One of the examples, these situations could go in a lot of different directions. So we just tried to drill down on a couple examples. One of them is unused parking lots. Obviously suburban office properties have a lot of parking that they use. And as tenants disappear, all this space sort of sits there remaining. And in the short term, some users are turning this into a staging area for vehicle rentals. for, say, enterprise car share or Zipcar, something of that nature. Long term, the ideal scenario is that these parcels are redeveloped. They need to be rezoned. You need to run through that entitlement process, and then they'd be redeveloped into a new use that better fits the demand in that community. However, not all communities have this, the level of demand that would substantiate new development. So what you're seeing is owners get more creative, and it might be, two of the examples we gave are autonomous vehicle staging area, or an urban farming, the shipping container type investment. So ultimately, these are two uses that need to be centrally located and need a lot of space, and it's, it can be difficult to find that. So these unused parking lots really do fill that void. Slide, please. Just a couple more examples: ghost kitchens, vertical farms, e-commerce pickup locations. Again, ghost kitchen, they need retail, ground level retail space. Vertical farms generally need a tall building. High ceilings are good. These uses where the necessary capital investment to develop the building on their own might just be cost prohibitive. So they need to find these alternative obsolete locations so that they can convert them into their new uses. Ultimately, though, the broader theme here is that owners are trying to adapt in-place infrastructure and properties to a shifting marketplace, and that form, character, and location are really driving what is possible from a cost-effective standpoint. But ultimately, creativity is winning the day as owners are looking to repurpose these buildings for new uses. Slide, please. So just to sort of review, we just sort of ran you through the how we got here, the outlook moving forward, considerations for stakeholders as they make their plans, and that approaches some people are taking in order to deal with these challenges. And looking ahead, it's really important for everyone involved to ask themselves, what do these changes mean for the communities that are impacted by my plans, by my business decisions? Smart owners will not only adapt to the changes, but they will incorporate community input and needs into their investment decisions. We are, as a society, we are re-entering this period with less separation of uses. So rather than living in a subdivision and driving to your office park in the suburbs, we're getting to a point where it's going to be far more common for people to live and work in the same area, in the same community. So there's going to be an overlap of uses as we continue to transition to this mixed use future. And because of this, whether owners are able to adapt their legacy buildings into people-friendly, people-first civic assets will really determine not only the financial viability of these projects, but they're going to go a long ways to determine the quality of our communities moving forward. And with that, I'll pass it back to Shannon.
Thank you so much, David. And round of applause for all of the Larson leaders. Thank you so much. What a fantastic presentation. I'm so excited to get into the question and answer portion of our presentation today. So we've got some questions that have come up in the chat. It looks like Dan asked a question to group 2, and Maria Galarza has taken a little bit of a stab in the chat of answering that. But to group 2, did your research find any innovative ideas of getting people to want to come back to the office? Some of the items that you shared can be found at home, such as access to the outdoors. So Ted and Maria, do you have anything else that you want to add to that?
Yeah, like as I was mentioning in the chat, I think as these options of working from home continue to emerge, like Ted mentioned, it's going to come down to choice. And for the folks that are looking for a space different than their homes to be working in, I think from the research and the readings that we've done, they're going to be looking at amenities that they enjoy having at home, but they want them at work. So think about ease of childcare, or as Maria mentioned, sort of like ease of commuting. So all the things that are the comforts that we enjoy while working from home are things that employers should be looking at providing as we look to going back to offices.
Thanks so much for that, Maria. Dominic asked a question, and I believe it's probably best to shoot to David and your team on group one. He asks, banks have for a while been less eager to help finance places designed for marketplace, co-working, incubators, and such. Did the group explore this aspect when considering alternatives for reformatting spaces? And if so, what was the result? Has there been a change in attitudes towards these type of uses?
You know, that is not something we dug into, and I might not be the best person to answer that. However, I do know that the biggest challenge seems to be, at least from a financing standpoint, seems to be having previous projects as comparables to use. And as more and more of these efforts seem to be underway, it does seem like it's getting a little bit easier to do that. But it does seem like you need a certain critical mass of progress. It's sort of a chicken before the egg situation. But maybe, I know Bali works on financing, and there are maybe other people that might be able to better answer that question than me.
Thanks, David. Anybody else have some thoughts on that?
Can I say something on that, Shannon?
Absolutely, Andrew.
Yeah, so unfortunately our answer is the same. We did not research that, but it's a great point. Obviously from commercial real estate is built on long-term leases, at least from a financing perspective. I mean, term as in lease term is the language of the banker, of the lender. And I think, I think the industry needs to evolve. I think from a business perspective, from a borrowing perspective, LTVs might come down, reserves might come up. From a business perspective, I'm sure you will see, lower TI packages. But I also think lenders need to evolve too. And that I think that looks like increasing their fluency in these sort of product types. I'm thinking specifically of like a Detroit shipping company. And I guess two things I'm thinking of: if lenders can make sense of residential real estate, which is built on the 12-month lease, I think the profile of commercial real estate is kind of trending in that direction. And also I'll point to, if you're familiar with Hudson Yards in New York, Neiman Marcus signed a 50-year lease and defaulted after 16 months. So congratulations, you negotiated a 50-year lease. I'm sure that looked like a win to Related. And the bankers probably would love to finance something like that. But in the end, if you don't have that sophistication, it easily falls apart, I think.
Thanks, Andrew. Bali, did you have something to add? It looked like you unmuted yourself for a moment.
Yeah, and from the perspective of a lender, and granted, we are a specialty lender doing PACE financing, which is traditionally thought of as financing for sustainability, but it's a creative source of financing where a lot of things that are done, it's really just real estate financing, because a lot of things that are done are just naturally more sustainable than code or than older buildings. We do a lot of underwriting of the asset, not the business, because PACE financing is this like unique thing that's attached to the parcel, not the business, right? So it's non-recourse. And I think there's a lot of thought about non-recourse lending, and especially, we do super long terms, and a lot of things we're doing now is kicking payments out for, 12, 18, 24 months. So that way folks can reestablish their business plans, get back on their feet, get the financing now, and just sort of capitalize interest for a while. So I think, we're getting more creative about this kind of stuff, and everybody else needs to get more creative too.
Thanks, Bali. Gina asked a question. I think that this is probably directed at Andrew's team. Do you have any examples of how we can support the small businesses that rely on the workforce population as their customer base? More specifically, do you have any ideas on how we can encourage downtown Detroit employees who are working remotely to come back from time to time? The downtown parks are open, and so are many restaurants and retailers. Gina, good job doing your little pitch for the biz. So Andrew, is there somebody on your team that would like to address that?
I think I'll just give my quick reaction. I think the best strategy for people who are sitting at home is, it's, I guess, obvious, but one I don't practice enough is shopping local, even if that's online. I started, for those of us who enjoy drinks from home, going to Kroger or Meijer to buy a bottle of wine is fine, but we have a small wine retailer right here in downtown Ann Arbor, and recently realized I should be doing nothing but buying from local businesses. A lot of these restaurants, for example, have switched to a kind of marketplace concept where they're selling their their ingredients and packaged goods either in their restaurant or online. So switching more of your spending dollars to those, I think, is a way to help your local economy from your home.
And Dan Comer, it looks like you also added to that. Do you have anything that you want to add to what you put into the chat?
No, not as particularly. I imagine Gina is familiar with the Detroit card, but I think that's something that Quicken has done a nice job of promoting, but I think it could be expanded. When they provided it to us, for example, I felt like that there's participating businesses that weren't included as available to that space. So maybe expanding that program and then encouraging, large employers as a way to incentivize their employees to come back is that, a lunch or two that could be eaten outside, but that would also have to be used in store. So it couldn't be simply for a delivery or something like that to be eaten at home.
Thanks, Dan. Stacy asked a question. I think it's probably most appropriately directed at Ted in Team 2 and Bali in Team 3. Stacy asks, do you know of resources for businesses to expand their amenity offerings? So for Ted and your team, can you direct somebody to maybe, do you know of resources that are available to add health and well-being amenities and technologies, and Bali, just amenities for companies to sort of come up to speed with the changing times?
So I'll just add my little bit in that I know I've read about like third-party services that kind of focus on providing these type of desirable amenities, and they kind of use their experience and almost like hospitality settings to kind of translate to bring those type of amenities to commercial office buildings. But I know Clark Lewis from our team might have a little bit more to expand on that.
Sorry, I'm having a few connection issues here.
We can hear you fine, Clark.
All right, can you repeat the transition?
Oh, we're looking for any resources that are available to companies to expand their amenities and to make offerings on amenities like the health and well-being technologies. Do you know of any like financial resources or programs that are available?
I'm not as aware as the financial resources, but on the technology side, there's a ton of app-based amenities that are coming forth. There's a lot of research recently that has been around knowledge is the future of amenities. That's one thing that's, more difficult to get at home as the lines become to get more blurred. So really, technology in the workplace, and some of the apps that we had shown throughout our presentation, I think are, the best starting points for knowledge-based amenities.
Thanks, Clark. Bali, does anyone on your team have something they'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'll kick it to Chris.
Thanks, Polly. Yeah, I mean, I think I would just reiterate what Clark said, is that in terms of, how we looked at this from the community, or from the company corporate culture standpoint, there's a lot of apps out there that are available and new ones coming to market. And so I don't have the answer for what the resources are, but I would say what we found is that finding which apps and software works best for a company and using those and developing a protocol for how and when they're used is really important. And so, the challenge, I guess, facing companies right now is to find which apps work best and integrate them into the workflow. And then that, as a result, will end up with reinforcing your corporate culture.
Thanks. Thanks so much for that, Chris. Mr. Gallinger, are you still on the line? I'm not sure that you sort of posted both a comment and a question in the chat. I'm wondering if you'd like to summarize that for the group.
Yeah, the question really is, we're all talking about kind of a paradigm shift in the work environment, and if that means that we're going to have, I don't know, a third or half of what our normal workplace density is, what is that going to mean to the market, and how do we figure out how we're going to drive sufficient density to make all this work? I mean, I can understand how we want all these amenities, but you got to be able to support them too. And that's going to require a certain level of density. So, how do we go at that?
David, does someone from your team want to take a first cut at that?
Yeah, I can tackle it. I think first and foremost, it's important to remember that we still don't know, this work from home trend. I know a lot of people are quick to say, well, this is going to be the future, but we tried this once already, about 10, 15 years ago. And after a few years, there was a pretty big backlash against the dispersed working, and companies all around the country were saying, we're not doing this anymore. People, you need to be in the office at least some of the time, because no matter how convenient things like Zoom are, it's still easier to connect with people in person, if you will. So on one hand, I'm definitely in the camp of, I think this trend is a little over, people are a little overzealous to think it's going to be here to stay in a broad sense. But from a supporting these amenities standpoint, I think the balance between reducing the amount of space, one of the plus sides of this is that if I know my company, the way they've done it is everyone has a desk, but not everyone is expected to come into the office every day. So we have nice office space in a nice building, and everyone has the opportunity to access the desk. But because of the flexibility, they didn't necessarily need to lease space for everyone at the same time. So we were able to lease out smaller, nicer space. And it was a nice way for them to sort of balance the higher per foot cost with the lower overall space. It ended up not necessarily canceling out, but it was much more palatable for them.
Thanks for that. Clark, I noticed you unmuted yourself a couple of times during David's remarks. Was that a mistake, or did you want have something to add?
I was just gonna add a little bit. I think, you know, some of the amenities that we have kind of identified are just more like human connection points and almost technologies that will help improve efficiencies and whatnot. So I think although there are certain costs associated with some of this stuff, I think, you know, if you're a longer term, you know, landlord, you have a longer term outlook, I think, you know, actually some of those, you know, solutions that are implemented could actually, you know, save money in the long term from an operation standpoint, or actually like attract, you know, additional tenants or higher rates and whatnot. So I think there's kind of a flip side to that as well.
Thanks for that. All right. Well, I think that that concludes the questions, at least the ones that are in the chat at this point. If you have any additional questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them. I'll give just a moment for that. And if not, if there are no further questions, once again, a round of applause for all of you Larson leaders. Phenomenally done. I'm so proud of all of you for the work that you've put in, and just really appreciate everybody's effort on this. The presentation and the recording of this webinar will be available online. Victoria will send a link to where you can find that to everybody afterwards, everybody who was registered afterwards. And for now, I will just say thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.